Lu Wubing. There is a son named Sun Qi and Luo Yang who is married to Zhang Taishu's daughter. The couple are extremely close. When Zhang died at the age of 20, Sun Qi, grieving, left home to live on a hillside estate. One day, Sun Qi was lying in bed in the rainy weather, and there was no one else in the house. Seeing a pair of women's feet under the curtain at the door, Mr. Sun asked in horror who it was. Only the curtains were lifted and a woman, about 18 years old, dressed plainly and with a slight black complexion and a lot of potatoes, like the daughter of a poor family, came in. Sun Qi, who thought she was coming from the village to rent a house, shouted at her, "If there's anything you should tell my family. How did you break into my house?" The woman smiled and said, "I am not from the village. My ancestry is Shandong. Surname is Liu. My father was a Bachelor of Arts, and my nickname was Disease-Free. I came here with my father, who died a long time ago. I am lonely. I admire the son of a family and a celebrity, and I would like to join you, Cheng Kangsheng, as your servant's servant. Your heart is very good, but it's not convenient for me to live here with the servants," says Sun Qi, laughing. "When I get home, I'll hire you with a top sedan." The woman hesitated. "How dare I expect to be your spouse when I'm foolish? Just for you to drive in the ferry. I'm not going to take the book down," Sun Qi said. "If you're a maid, you'll have to pick a lucky day." He pointed his finger at the bookshelf and told her to take the 4th volume of the general book, meaning to try her studies. The woman searched through the books and found them. She gave them to Sun Qi after browsing them. She said, with a smile, "The river Kuixing is not in her room today." Sun Qi listened and couldn't help but move, so he left her behind to hide in the room from outsiders. Without illness, Sun Qi was happy to wipe the table, organize books, incinerate incense, and scrub the incense stove for him and clean the room. At night, Mr. Sun's servants went to sleep elsewhere, leaving them to be treated as if they were ill. "Without being ill, you will be more attentive." She didn't leave with the candle until she was told to go to bed. Sun Qi woke up in the middle of the night and felt like a person lying on the head of the bed. He touched her hands and knew that she was not ill, so he woke her up. "Get up and stand under the bed in fear. Why don't you go to bed somewhere else? Is my bedside where you sleep?" Sun Qi reprimanded her. "I'm timid. I'm afraid to sleep alone," he said sheepishly. Sun Qi has pity on her, let her sleep in the bed. Suddenly, he smelled a lotus scent coming from an unsickly body, and was so shocked that he asked her to share a pillow with him. Sun Qi was shaken, gradually pulling away from illness and sleeping together in a bedpan. They loved each other. Sun Qi was very fond of her. Sun Qi thought, "It's not always the way to hide without getting sick, and I'm afraid I'm gonna make a fuss about taking her home with me." Sun Qi has an aunt, only a dozen or so away from here, and he consults without illness to let her avoid her home first and pick her up later. Without illness, I thought this was a good idea and said, "Your aunt and I already know each other. I'll go without you notifying me." Sun Qi gave her a ride, and the more the wall went away. Sun Qi's aunt is an elderly widow. When she opened the door after dawn, a woman walked in. She asked, and the woman replied, "Your nephew asked me to greet Auntie." The boy wanted to go home, but he was short of horses, so he let me borrow her for the time being. The old lady believed it and kept her. After Sun moved home, he pretended that his aunt had a maid, and that his aunt wanted to give it to him, and sent someone to pick him up. Since then, she has sat and waitressed. As the days went on, Sun Qi became more spoiled and sick, and married her as a concubine. There's a Goman who wants to marry him, and he won't accept the idea that he's too old to be sick or to beg. After knowing that he was not ill, Sun Qi tried his best to persuade him to marry his wife. Sun Qi had to marry the daughter of the Zhu family again, but he still doted on being ill. Shu is a highly admirable person who never bumps into bedfellows without illness, and is more deferential to serve her without illness, so the relationship is good. Later, Shu gave birth to a son, Akin, who treated the child as if he were alive and well. The baby was just 3 years old, and she used to leave her wet nurse and go to bed with the sick. Shu told him to go back, and he won't leave. Soon after that, Su died of illness, and begged Sun Qi to say, "No illness loves my son, even if the child is her own good." and take her right as his wife. After Zhu's burial, Sun Qi did as Zhu's last words. After he told his relatives about this, everyone said that it was impossible and that he was not ill. There's a widow in this county whose daughter, Wang Tianguan, has asked someone to come to Sun's house to propose marriage. Sun Qi was very reluctant to settle the matter. After repeated requests from the Wang family, the matchmakers tried their best to promote the beauty of the Wang family. And Sun Qi's relatives admired the power of Tianguan and unceremoniously encouraged him. Sun Qi wavered and finally married the Wang family. Mr. Wang is, of course, gorgeous, but unusually forceful. The usual clothes, 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 clothes. Anything you don't like, just throw it away. Sun Qi couldn't bear to go against her character because she liked her. After only a few months, I took my husband's hand and prevented him from sharing the room with the sick. He often pivots his anger to his husband, making a few loud noises. Sun Qi couldn't bear it, so he stayed alone. Mr. Wang is even more exasperated. Sun Qi ran into the city under an excuse to take refuge. Mr. Wang blamed Sun Qi's absence on being ill. And though he looked at her face and cared for her carefully, Mr. Wang was unhappy. One night, she put her in sickness to bed to serve, and Qin was always sickly. Every time Qin cries out for help, he cries. Weary, Wang scolded Qin and quickly asked his wet nurse to take him away. Qin couldn't go, tried to force him to go, and he cried even harder. Wang was so angry that he jumped out of bed and beat Qin so badly that he followed his wet nurse. Qin has since been frightened out of his illness. Without food or drink, Wang forbade Qin from taking care of Qin without illness. Qin cries all day. At one time, Wang yelled at his mama to drop Ji into the ground, and the child cried loudly and screamed for water, and Wang refused to give it to him. Until it was dark, he could see Wang's absence without illness, and he secretly took water to Jian, and Jian saw her and lost water to boil her clothes. Mr. Wang heard and came out furiously. When Jian heard her voice, she immediately held back her crying and stretched her legs, leaving her with a fright. Without symptoms, I can't help but cry. Wang is furious, swearing. Do you want to threaten me with my child's death? It is not to say that the children of the Sun family killed the son of Wang Fu, and Wang Tianguan's daughter can also afford it. I heard that I was sick, but I had to stop my tears with sobs and plead for Qin's funeral. After Wang left, he touched Qin without any problems and felt that he was still warm. Then he said to his wet nurse, "You'll have to carry it. Wait for me in the wild. I'll go right away. If the child dies, we bury him together. If he survives, we raise him together." The mama promised to leave, sick back in the room, with some of his jewelry, sneaking out of the house to catch up with his wet nurse. The two of them looked at Jian together and saw that the child had woken up. They liked it so much that they discussed going to Sun Qi's manor to live with their aunt, worried that she won't be able to walk. Nanny will wait for her. Only she walked as fast as the wind, and her mother used her full strength to catch up with her. Round 2 o'clock, Qin's illness became so severe that he could no longer travel. The two men took a shortcut into a village, came to the door of a farmer, stood up to the sunrise at the door, knocked on the door and borrowed a room to stay. He took out his jewelry and sold it for money. He found a witch and a doctor to treat Qin's illness, but he still hasn't gotten better. Weeping, without illness, she said, "Keep an eye on the baby. I'll go get his father." The mama was surprised that she said it was so ridiculous that she disappeared without any illness. On the same day, Mr. Sun was in bed in Beijing, walking in silently without illness. Sun Qi rose in surprise and said, "Did I dream when I was just sleeping?" He grabbed his hand, stomped on his feet, and choked up to speak. "It took a long time for me to say, I suffered so much that I fled too young with my child. Before I could finish, I burst into tears and fell to the ground." Sun Qi was stunned and suspected that he was in a dream. The crowd was baffled by the sight of sick clothes and shoes still on the ground. Sun Qi hurried to clean up his outfit and came home at night. When he got home, Sun Qi cried and scolded Wang when he heard that his son was dead and was free from illness. Mr. Wang retorted. Sun Qi rushed to the crown and touched the knife with her hands. The women hurried to stop him. Sun Qi couldn't get close to the Wang family and threw the knife away from the far side. The knife was hitting the Wang family's forehead and bleeding out. Wang's hair was loose, and ghosts ran out of the house, crying, to tell her. Sun Qi captured her and beat her up so badly that she broke her clothes into pieces that she couldn't turn around for pain. Before she was carried back to her room to be nursed and rested after she was injured. When the Wangs heard about the incident, they led the crowd on horseback. Sun Qi also gathered his strong servants to resist. The two sides yelled at each other all day before they broke up. The Wangs didn't make any money, won't stop, and started a lawsuit. Mr. Sun also sent escorts into the city to defend the government and complain about Mr. Wang's evil deeds if the order did not bring Sun Qi to his knees. He sent him to the officers who specialized in the culture and discipline to ingratiate himself with the Wang family. Mr. Xu, as son of the whole family, was a righteous man, and upon learning the truth, he said furiously, "Did the lord of the county think I was the most vile instructor in the world, a shameless person who would lick his ass by extorting money from the heavens? I can't do this kind of beggar." Sun Qi left without permission from the county. However, Wang Jia was helpless, so he instigated his relatives and friends to mediate for both of them, and asked Sun Qi to come to Wang Jia to thank them for their crimes. Sun Qi refused, and the mediator came and went more than 10 times. Wang's injury has gradually improved, and Sun Qi tried to arrest her, but was afraid that the Wang family would leave her alone, so she couldn't get over it. Sun Qi escaped because he was not sick, and the child died, day and night. "I want to find a wet nurse. Let's get to the truth. I thought I wasn't sick," I said. "Run away to Yang." If there was a Yang Jiachuan in the next village, he suspected they had escaped there and went to check, but none knew. Some people say that there is a village 50 miles away called Yangu, and Sun Qi is busy sending people on horseback to visit. I found my wet nurse and Kin. It turned out that Kin was not dead, and the disease was gradually healed. After the meeting, they were all very happy, and the people sent to pick them up. Kin saw his father and burst into tears, and Sun Qi shed tears. Wang heard that Jian was still alive and ran out of his body in a furious rage, and wanted to curse him. The child was crying, and saw Wang Shi with his eyes open, crashing into his father's arms in fear, as if to hide. Sun Qi hugged and looked at Jian, who was dead, scream at him in a hurry and wake up later. "I don't know how to be cruel," Mr. Sun said grudgingly. "I frightened my son into this. Write the divorce papers and send Wang home." The Wangs have sent the Wangs back. Mr. Sun had to live in his separate yard with his son and never again with Mr. Wang. She told Sun Qi in detail some strange things about being free of illness, and Sun Qi realized that being free of illness was a ghost. Grateful for her affection, I buried her clothes and shoes, and set up a monument titled The Tomb of the Ghost Wife Lu Wu. It wasn't long before Wang gave birth to a boy, and she strangled him herself. Mr. Sun grew angrier and arrested Mr. Wang again. The Wangs brought her back in the car. Sun Qi wrote down the plaintiffs and sued them at the government office. Because Wang is the daughter of Tianguan, Sun Qi's character is not accepted by the government. After Wang Tianguan died, Sun Qi continued to sue, and the government decided to return Wang Shixiu to his mother's house. Sun never married again, but took a concubine. When Wang came home, he lived for 3 or 4 years with a reputation as a fierce man, but no one came to propose. Wang's remorse is now in full swing, but the past is irreparable. Later, a mother who had been employed by the grandchildren came to the house, and Wang greeted her warmly, tears streaming down her throat. "It's like I miss my old husband." When her mother went back, she told Sun Qi, and Sun Qi laughed. More than a year later, Mr. Wang's mother died. She's alone, she's on her own, and a couple of her brothers and siblings hate her. The more Wang's career, the more he lost, the more he shed tears. When a poor reader's wife dies, Wang's brother wants to give her a thick dowry to marry the reader, but Wang refuses. She repeatedly asked people who often came to her to send messages to Sun Qi, weeping and saying that she had felt remorse for the past, and Sun Qi never listened. One day, Wang, with a maid, stole a donkey from his home and rode to Sun's. Sun Qi just walked out of the house, and Wang kneeled down the steps, weeping. Sun Chi tried to kick her out, and Wang pulled his clothes down again. Sun Chi firmly tweeted, "If we remarry and get together again, normally we will be fine without any disputes. And if there are disputes, your brothers will behave like wolf and then want a divorce again. It will be difficult. I stole it this time," Wang said. "There is no reason to go back. If you want to stay, I'll stay. Otherwise, it's just death. Besides, I've been with you since I was 21, and I've been taken back to my mother's house since I was 23. Even if I had a terrible crime, wouldn't I have any feelings? And then, after that, you take the flowers off your wrists and put them on your arms and cover them with your sleeves. And you say, 'Don't you remember the oath that we burned when we were parents?'" Sun Chi was in tears, which led to her being pushed into the interior, but still suspected that Wang was deceiving himself to get a quote from her brothers as evidence. Wang said, "I escaped without permission. How can I face seeing my brother again? If you don't believe me, I've got tools of my own. Please let me break my finger and tell you everything." He pulled a knife out of his waist, put his left hand on the side of the bed, cut off a finger with one knife, and blood flowed in. Mr. Sun was stunned and rushed to patch her up. Mr. Wang's face was bruised, but he didn't moan. "I woke up today from a dream of sorghum," laughs. "Why would you suspect me if I borrowed a room and made a plan?" Mr. Sun let his son and concubine live in a separate house, running back and forth from one place to another every day. Many people seek good medicine for Wang's hand wounds. More than a month will be fine. Since then, Wang hasn't eaten meat. He just reads Buddhism behind closed doors. After a long time, Wang told Sun Chi that his family's housework was wasted and nobody was in charge of it. And Wang said, "I wanted to do nothing about it when I came here. But now I'm afraid that my children and grandchildren will starve to death because the family's expenses are so wasted that they cannot make ends meet. I can't help it. I'll just eat with my cheeks up." So she called in the maids and asked them to spin the fabric daily. The family, who came to her house on her own, despised her and sneered at her privately. Wang seems to be unable to hear. Even when checking textile quantities, lazy people who did not meet the quota received a whip from her. It was not polite that people were afraid of her. Wang personally oversaw the servants in charge of the accounts and calculated everything carefully. Sun Chi was delighted to have his son and concubine see Wang every day. By this time, Jian was 9 years old, and Wang's treatment of him doubled down. Each morning, he went to private shrew, and Wang often left delicious things for him to come back. As a result, the child grew closer to her. One day, Jian hit a sparrow with a stone. Just as Wang passed by, the stone fell and hit her on the head, and Wang fell to the ground and passed out. Sun Chi was furious and beat his son. Wang woke up, tried his best to dissuade him, and liked to say, "I've abused my son in the past, and I've always felt a heart attack."
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.